Hey guys, so we are here. We are actually interviewing Pamela Duff. She is a mental health counselor. I'm pretty stoked about this. How are
Yeah,
you feeling about this?
I'm good about it. I've been
Yeah.
waiting to do this for a while now. I have so many questions and want to pick so many brains, and this is exciting for me.
Yeah.
I've been wanting this whole interview thing to happen to evolve the podcast for so long, and I feel like that evolution is really going.
Getting there.
So, Pamela, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what your field is, so that everybody can kind of understand exactly? Because you recommended choice theory to us, and
Yes.
that is a huge thing in our lives right now, especially in Discord. So,
Okay. Yeah, I'm a mental health counselor, so most of my focus is on traditional talk therapy. So I basically sit and talk to people through their problems for about 6 to 8 hours a day. It's focused a little bit on mental illness, but a lot of it's more holistic. So I'm not like a psychologist where I'm like coming in, diagnose, and then going from there. It's a lot more whole person centered.
Okay.
Mhm.
That was a
Oh,
lot for me
I
to
work with
process.
adults. I work with adults. I
Adult
That's the only
strictly.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see a lot of, or do you experience a lot of crazy things? Like sometimes you have to really work through some issues that somebody might have. Do you do that often?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes people are in crisis when they're in session. Other times they're calm, cool, and collected. Sometimes we're just joking around. Other times it's very serious. It's really just whatever the person is bringing to the table that day.
So you do have experience with like the extremes when it comes to the mental health.
Oh, yes. I started my career actually working at a methadone clinic. So it was
Oh.
pretty intense at first.
I imagine that's intense. I've seen some very scary videos from
yeah.
methadone clinics.
Yeah, it can be a bit wild at times.
Do you with what you do in your practice, you said that you don't diagnose, that you don't work on the psychiatric side of things. So you're not dealing with the mental illness as much. Do you do like a lot of couples therapy, or is it just standalone? Like, what exactly is it that you specialize in? I think that's probably where we need to start.
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so I work with adults and usually with individuals, although I have done couples counseling. I don't prefer it just because I really think a lot of issues with couples can be addressed on a one-to-one basis a lot better because a lot of it comes down to issues within the person that they're bringing into the relationship. So I just prefer to work that way, although that's not to discredit marriage counseling at all. My specialty areas are anxiety, life transitions, and just general wellness. So I would say I don't see a lot of like significant mental illness in my practice, although from time to time it does show up. So I can still diagnose, I still have to run insurance, all of those things. It's just less of my focus because I find when you label people in that way very intensely, a lot of the time it causes them to be more disempowered
Mhm.
and use it as an identity piece and kind of a reason to continue certain patterns.
We've been saying that a lot
Yeah, we
over the
have.
last couple weeks.
Mhm.
Yep. People,
Yeah, I was
where is the
hearing that
hello?
and I
My
was like,
name
oh,
is.
they get it.
Right. So you are the one who recommended choice theory to us. What brought choice theory to your attention?
Um, I guess it was something that I always kind of thought about interacting with people and about like how the world functioned, but it was more on like a back burner. So like it wasn't like forefront in my mind, like, oh, I practice choice theory like
Mhm.
that until I became a counselor. And one of the things they have you do is kind of specialize your theoretical orientation, which is like the lens that you view a person through. So I took a quiz in a book actually and it spits out choice theory reality therapy, and it's such a small like theory in the scope of like counseling as a whole that I had never even heard of it. I didn't know what it was. So I did a bunch of research on it and I read the book Choice Theory and I was just like, holy shit, this is what I've been thinking the entire time. It was probably like one of the most validating things I've ever read.
Yeah, this book is absolutely insane.
The most validating thing she's ever read. That's
Yeah.
how I felt when I ran through the book.
Yeah.
I had that moment of like, I've believed this since I was a teenager.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in that medical field, but this is the way that I've lived my life.
Right.
And now there's like a term behind it. It definitely makes you feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like,
Right.
it is your choice, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Reading through it, it sounds like just what you would think is a lot of common sense.
Right. Exactly. It's something that's just always kind of in the background when you are a person who like kind of sticks more towards like accountability and you're always striving for something, it's kind of just this unconscious thing. So to hear it like brought forward in this way, it was like, oh shit, maybe I do know what I'm talking about. This is really cool.
But
At
that
least that
was
was what it was for me.
reality changing stuff right there.
Hell yes.
Yeah.
How exhausting is it doing what you do for 6 to 8 hours a day? Because we only do it three hours at a time, twice, sometimes 3 times a week, and it's taxing. Like it's not an easy thing. I can't imagine that you have a very active evening when you get off of work.
I sure don't. I cook with my boyfriend and then kind of like chill out because it can be really intense. It depends on the day because, like I said, everybody brings something different in each day, each session. And I'm more of an introverted person. So a lot of the time, like it takes all of my social battery to do this job, but it's worth it at the same time.
How does that affect your relationship?
Um, it really doesn't affect my relationship. I think if we would have met a couple years ago when I was newer into the practice and I hadn't like learned boundaries and my own like self-regulation skills, I probably would have brought it in and been a lot more frazzled and stressed. But like as I've grown over the years in my career, I've kind of learned how to cut that off at the end of the day and be like, this is time for me to be a person now.
So with what you do as a career, how would you say that this has helped you progress with your own mental health?
Ooh. I think it was very illuminating because I definitely went into the field with this mentality of like, I'm just a scientist. I want to study this. None of this applies to me. And then when I started talking to people through certain issues and then learning about some of the diagnoses, some of like the common issues that people come in with, I was like, oh shit, I pattern after some of this too. And that like kind of sparked me to go, hey, maybe I need to go to therapy. Maybe I need to reflect a little bit more than I have been.
Have you guys ever seen that meme of the Spider-Man pointing at the Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Like they catch each other?
Yes.
That's how I felt when I started like catching on to things. And I'm like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, autism makes sense to me now.
You're like, why did this always kind of bother me before? I don't know. And then you're like, oh, because it's.
Yeah, it's because that's me. Get that little flashlight looking around that room in there and you're like, ooh, a lot of mirrors in this bedroom. I don't recognize that.
Exactly.
You look like you had something you wanted to say.
Well, we went to breakfast this morning. While we were at breakfast, we had a conversation of actors and people who are in relationships that are dating actors or who are actor and actress that are dating, and how you never know if they're acting or if their relationship is
Like they're being
genuine in the moment, right? And that made me think about the interview that we were going to have later. And I was going to ask you, when you are having conflict and you're doing conflict resolution in the moment with your partner, are you able to step out of that therapist and like process your emotions while in conflict, or do you analyze while going to, because that's a very like, that would be a very exhausting, difficult thing to deal with.
Yeah, I do step out of it, but it is a very active decision. Like I have to sit there and kind of like do this, like, you're not a therapist right now. You're not trying to guide anybody to the answer. You're not trying to get them on their own path. Like this is your life. This is your shit. Like you need to participate in it and not be, kind of like taking that backseat role that therapists often do. Is we're guiding, we're helping you come to the answer. We're not telling you what to do.
Right.
So like, yeah, it definitely doesn't show up in my relationship in that way. I have to be very careful not to bring it in, actually.
That's good.
That is good. Yeah, the way that I view that is that you're no longer the little red laser. You're the cat.
Right. Yeah. You've got a whole lot going on in your personal life. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't go through that. So like, even though we do the emails, we are addressing things ahead of time so that if it comes into our lives, we know how to approach the conversation because we've already had it while not in conflict. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't imagine not having what we have and then having the knowledge we have and getting into an argument with somebody and being like, okay, I see what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah. There is an impulse every once in a while. I'm like, or like I want to use like therapeutic jargon, and then I'm like, no, that's your job. That's what you get paid for. We need to leave that.
Yeah.
We need to leave that over there because you're still a human being. Yeah.
So are you currently caught up on the podcast?
I got through the one that was released on Monday, like halfway. So I was listening to the part about the bagpipes, and like that's where I'm at right now.
Okay.
Could you imagine someone actually sends me bagpipes?
Yeah, please.
It could be cheap
For the
ones.
love of God, no one send us bagpipes.
beginner ones for $90.
Beginner bagpipe. I'd like to see what that looks like.
Right? I imagine like a very child size.
Jordan found a set of bagpipes on Facebook for like $650 and he sent them to me. And I'm like, don't you fucking send those to her, dude.
People are looking. I have scouts.
You do. You really do.
All my dreams are going to come true. I could do it in the backyard, off in the corner.
Yeah.
So you just hear it distantly. It'll be like Braveheart.
Yes, it's more haunting that way when it's from a
Right.
distance. Yes.
Yeah.
So as somebody who, I'm assuming when you are working through things with a client, you need detail. Right?
Yes.
Without the detail, there's really not much you can do besides go, I empathize. Good luck.
Exactly.
So in the moments where you're talking with a client, say they're in like a high anxious state, and they start throwing out terms like he's a narcissistic abuser or they're constantly gaslighting me. Are those terms that make your job harder, or is that something that you're able to dissect when they say it and understand what they mean?
Oh, that's a good question.
Oh, yeah. Actually, you see this a lot now because I see a lot of like college students. So like Gen Z is on the up and up with like all the terms. All right. So
Right.
they're constantly bringing these things in, but a lot of the times they misunderstand the terms, which makes it a little tricky. So generally, when people start throwing that around, my first question to them is, well, what does that mean to you? What does that look like in this person? What does it
Okay.
mean to be dating a narcissist? Because sometimes people just throw out these labels that have like not really very much behind it. So we have to explore that piece.
Okay, so somebody who works in the field, those statements can be very vague for you.
Yes, because like I have an understanding what like a narcissist would mean, but like that doesn't mean that my client necessarily does have the same textbook understanding that I do.
Right.
What would you say the biggest misgeneralization is of somebody calling someone a narcissist? I have a deep-seated hatred for that word.
Yeah.
I would say that's a really tough question. It really bothers me a lot too when it's brought up very like casually.
Yeah.
Like it's just like this label thrown on to people like, oh well, he's a narcissist. And it's almost always used as like a dismissive way to talk about a past partner.
Okay.
And they
It is,
can't
yeah.
all be narcissists. They just can't.
Right.
It's statistically not likely.
Yep.
That was a good way to put that. A very passive way to talk about an ex-partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's
Throw a
good.
label on and then cast aside. And that's not helpful for anybody.
Right. It also removes all the accountability from the conversation because they're throwing all the shade on them versus looking inward.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's just, well, you know, I was victimized in this situation. And there are absolutely cases of victimization and abuse in relationships, but a lot of the times there are other pieces going on that you are contributing to in one way or another. Like, even if it's just the decision to stay.
Right.
Right.
This is so
And that has-
validating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While he's up walking around, I appreciate you taking the time to do this with us tonight.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me on. It was really cool, like getting that request from you.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly, when I like reached out to you about choice theory, I had no real intention. I just felt very like in the moment, like I needed to share this book with you guys. I don't even remember what it was that you were talking about. I was just like, if they don't know this already, they have to have this.
I'm so glad that you did reach out because this book is
Life-changing.
right. Like you guys said, it's very validating. I'm reading this and I'm like, that's right, Mom.
Yeah.
I know what I'm
Yes.
talking about.
I've ran through the book 3 times now, and the only thing that I have not been able to listen to all the way through all 3 times is the school chapter
Yeah.
because
Oh,
it
yeah.
is completely irrelevant to me and I don't care. So like after I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, next chapter. I'm done with the school conversation.
Yeah.
No, same. When I first read it, I think I put the book down at that point, and then I went back and like reread the first parts because I was just like, this is not. I have no interest in working with children. I'm not in these systems. We're not doing this today. So
Yeah.
yeah, completely get that.
So I know we're getting ready to get into the questions or the answers to the questions that you would want to provide. Just something that popped in my mind as somebody who works with people who could be in crisis. Have you ever had a client that you've seen repeatedly really grow an attachment with you?
Oh yeah, I would say like that happens with a lot of my clients because I see them usually from anywhere from like 6 months to a year. We're going on like maybe a year and a half at my longest client at this point. So when you see somebody once a week and you're
Yeah.
talking to them for a whole hour, like there's definitely attachment that's built.
Has there ever been an attachment where you felt that it was dangerous due to the things that they would have going on mentally?
Oh no, 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 no.
Okay.
I pretty early on, I screen to make sure that the people who are seeing me are at the right level of care. So I practice in private practice. So it's a lot more like low key kind of
Okay.
diagnoses and issues. So like something dangerous like that, that person would more likely end up in a hospitalized setting or in like an intensive program. So I just don't usually see it,
Gotcha.
thankfully.
Yeah, that was actually a good question too.
Yeah.
I know that I from experience and like people that I know that people who have borderline tend to attach to their therapist really fucking hard.
Yes.
So that was actually a question that was on my list of things to ask her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you just beat me to it. One of the things that we wanted to talk about was how to identify the workless in the early 20s when it seems to be a normal job hop, etc. So we talked about the workless a lot in I think it was episode 24.
I don't recall which episode.
It was the first time we introduced choice theory to the podcast in terms of actual discussion. And that was a very big holy shit moment for me because of the amount of people that write in that are like, my spouse doesn't work or he can't keep a job for more than 2 months. And I know that when people are young, like the question asked, there is a lot of job hopping. You don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life. You don't have a career yet. I mean, you really don't know shit about the world if you're in your early 20s. So how does that work for I guess in your profession? How does that look?
I would say if you're trying to suss this out about another person, a really good place to look is not in the career realm because like we established, I mean, it's pretty normal to job hop or career hop or change your mind when you're in your 20s, right? I would look more to what does their day-to-day routine look like? Do they keep commitments to their friends and family? Like, or is there a general air of just winging it, going with it, or like all the decisions made are usually will be more based on like what's going on for them in that moment versus what they've committed to during that day. So last minute plan cancellations, a lot of like just flakiness because that shows up in workplace situations. You'll see it in your interpersonal life as well.
How does that correlate to mental health though? Because I know that you said you're an introvert. I am as well. I'm one of those people that will make plans when I feel good. And then when it comes time to do something like 5 hours in advance, I'm panicking and not wanting to do it. And I'm looking for reasons to cancel the plans. But when it comes to work, I don't do that because you have to earn. So I will cut my social sessions real quick, but I won't do that when it comes to my work life because money's important to me more so than my social life.
Yeah.
So how does that pan out? Like, is that a good indicator?
I would say only if you're talking about someone that you're potentially dating. So we attend to the things that we value. So Chris, you really value work and striving and progress and like furthering your career. If you're potentially dating someone and you're trying to figure out, is this person like a part of like what, Glasser would call the workless? If they say that they value you, but they're consistently breaking their commitments, that's kind of a different thing. So I would say like, it's not necessarily something you would see in friends as much. It would be more in the context of a romantic relationship.
Okay.
Are they not showing up for me?
That's a good question. A lot of people are scared to ask themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you guys? Did you think of anything that would indicate like this type of personality type when you saw the question?
For me, it comes down to, I think of a mama's boy, somebody that's never had to really do anything because it's always been handed to them and they get used to being catered to. And as they get into adult life, they're looking for that next person to cater to them so that they can just skate through.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, I don't have anyone in my life that is a workless because I don't surround myself with people who lack ambition. I don't understand that mindset. Frankly, it pisses me off.
Yeah.
Like even with my kid, my daughter's in her early to mid 20s and she was that person for a long time. And like, we didn't connect very well because I don't understand not wanting to thrive.
You don't get the mindset.
Right.
I would pay attention to punctuality.
Like timing?
Yeah, if they're constantly late to shit.
Yeah.
Every time. It's a repetitive pattern, and there's always an excuse for it.
Yeah.
That would be a red flag to me when it comes to being workless.
Because there's a big difference between, like, kind of like what Chris was saying, like there's a big difference between the person who is anxious about a social situation and cancels like an hour before, is apologetic about it, makes an attempt to reschedule, all these things, versus someone who's like chronically showing up late, does this like last minute, doesn't really offer, like any sort of reasoning, doesn't really offer anything to the situation. They're not trying to preserve the relationship because they're only thinking about, okay, what's going on with me today?
Mm.
They're not like towing that line.
A high level of selfishness.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that high
Yes.
level of selfishness, some people might label as narcissism.
Oh man.
Ooh, all the way back around. Yes.
So reality therapy, is that different from choice theory?
So reality therapy is the practice of choice theory in a therapeutic setting. So like I would call
Okay.
myself a reality therapist.
So reality therapy is practicing choice theory.
As strictly as a therapist, yeah.
As a therapist, okay. So as somebody who counsels people in choice theory, how is that something you even begin to bring up to somebody? I'm very sure it's a shock to their system to go, you're making the choices, that's kind of fucking up your life.
Yeah, it is actually pretty difficult. And I would say, sorry about that. I would say first step is you have to establish a lot of comfort with your client. So there's a lot of relationship building and a lot more of the validating type of energy in the beginning of the therapeutic relationship. So the first couple sessions are going to look a lot more conversational and a lot more just like information collecting so the other person feels heard.
Okay.
And then there's a point once like a certain level of rapport is built with the person where it kind of switches, where I will start challenging more of what they're saying. So I'm listening for like little unconscious rules that we all have kind of going in the back of our head. Some of them are super helpful, others not at all helpful, and they're usually lacking in accountability somehow, or they're just like really like weird stuff we decided was true when we were kids. So I'm listening for those things, and there comes a point where I'll start just being like, who told you that? They'll say something, I'll be like, who told you that? Why is it that way? Who told you it was that way? Just kind of pushing back a little bit against like this.
Like questioning
This
their belief
idea.
system. Okay.
Exactly. So that's how it kind of starts, is like there's a little bit of a pushback. And then they see that there's a safe space in the relationship again to have a pushback, but like the therapist is not going to criticize you or judge you or abandon you. You can have pushback without there being a problem. And then from there, depending on the client, I will start to explain certain elements of choice theory when it like feels like they're ready for it.
Okay. How often do you have people become defensive or combative when you start bringing up choice theory?
I would say not super often with my clients. I think that
Okay.
if it's something about like the way the relationship develops or like the people who are seeking me out, that like my ideal client typically is kind of ready for the information, or they have it again running in the background all along. It just needs to be brought forward.
Okay.
What would you say your average age group is for your clients?
I usually see people about 18 to 35.
Okay. That's a pretty big age gap, right? In
Yeah.
terms of like social standards. Do you think that people who have no life before social media has a harder time having the confrontational conversations than people who did? Like, I would imagine talking to a 35-year-old would be easier than talking to an 18-year-old when you're giving that pushback, because they're used to having some sort of confrontation in their life instead of just having everyone agree with them on social media. Because when you don't like something someone says on social media, you just delete them.
You block
There's
them.
not a real connection or friendship there. It's just a digital leash. So
Yeah.
I'm curious how that looks. Have you ever noticed anything like that?
I would say, yeah, it is easier talking to people who are a bit older and have that like that lens instead of like it all being like through social media and a lot of relationships leaning heavy on social media. I would say I'm trying to like think of in the practice like how that would show up. It really does just depend on the person though. Like the age does have some to do with it, but some people's minds are just a little bit more open to the idea of being challenged than others. And like this just comes down to a lot of personality traits. So people who are really high in narcissistic tendencies, that's what we'll call them. We won't call them narcissists, but they're just
Okay.
very like firmly planted in their beliefs and they are not budging. That's going to be the person that's the hardest. Sometimes that's someone older who's just been like marinating on their ideas longer. Sometimes it's someone younger who's like living in an echo chamber of social media.
Okay.
It really just depends.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, the other question that I was going to ask, I'm writing shit down as you're asking it so that I won't forget.
Okay.
When it comes to, Dr. Glasser said that when he's doing his therapy sessions, most of his clients are people who are out of relationships or getting ready to destroy a relationship. And they're in that last ditch effort of trying to get somebody to help them either save their marriage or get over the fact that their marriage is ending. Is that similar to your practice? Is a lot of your shit based off of relationships? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I mean, like Glasser, he really touches on a lot that the fact that a lot of major dysfunction in our life comes from unhealthy relationship patterns or unsatisfying relationships in one way or another, whether they're present in like a current relationship or one that you are trying to get over.
Right.
It's still like the ghost of that relationship. So I would say almost all of my clients, if it's not a romantic partner, it's their mother or it's a sibling or it's a best friend. A lot of it is a relational issue.
So some type of close relationship that impacts their daily
Mm-hmm.
goings. Okay.
Yeah. Reading that book changed my view on the word relationship. Because I mean, obviously, you know that you have a relationship with your best friend and a relationship with your mom, but when you think relationship, you always think intimacy. So now when I say relationship, it's never based off of a significant other. It's always the way that you interact with the people in your life.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether it's good or bad. And that's how I'm determining relationships because of that book. So it
Yeah.
did change my perspective on that a little bit.
Yeah,
Do you-
it's that give and take.
Yeah. We had somebody email in recently that was very pro therapy. She was somebody that had borderline and she was very connected to her therapist.
Yes. Very, very connected.
And the entire email was therapy's so great. Everyone should go to therapy.
Go
You
to
should see a
therapy.
therapist. Would you date somebody if they've never been to therapy? Therapy. Do you how do I word this? Do you have a lot of people that come just to work through the issues of their past relationships before getting into another one, like with the intent, or is it more of a need for closure? I don't know how to word this. I really don't know what I'm trying to ask, but does that make sense?
I think I'm kind of grasping it. So like a lot of the times it does start as like someone coming in like almost like in a grieving process. They're
Okay.
grieving a past relationship and like they're having a hard time moving past the emotions of it and they're not in the place yet to really examine it.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because I feel like we tell people all the time not to get into a relationship until you've done the dirty work of your previous one. You know, you need to examine everything, figure out what went wrong, figure out where you can take the accountability and improve your life before starting bringing that baggage into a new relationship. But with the culture that we live in, everybody jumps from person to person to person. I don't see a lot of that work being done, and then it sabotages the future. So I guess the question that I was trying to ask is do you think it would be more beneficial if people took 6 months, a year in between like relationships that were substantial to like
process.
really work through their shit, or therapy? I mean, I guess that would be a thing for most people if they need it, but
Ooh, and I feel like I'm going to keep coming back to this, and I do apologize, but
It's
it
all right.
really depends on the person's personality. So I think that time can be lengthened and shortened based solely on the person's level of reflectiveness. So some people are just naturally extremely introspective. Like
Okay.
they just can't help themselves. They tear everything down. They need to look at every little bit, every little corner, and they do a lot of the work on their own. That's not to say that they don't still need time, because they probably do need to work through the intense emotional piece of it. But it's going to depend on your level of insight.
Right.
So are you a person who naturally reflects back on things and like really looks closely at yourself and your relationships, or are you someone who's head in the clouds oblivious? Because you might need a little bit more time.
I would say, yeah, definitely they would need some more time.
You are one of those people who rip everything apart, internalize.
Yeah, I could sense you looking at me.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to get your attention so I could be like, you do that.
I
But
know.
You weren't
I
looking,
didn't.
So
I didn't want that accountability right now. I wasn't ready for it. I felt the intent when you looked at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I-
That's good though.
yeah.
To be self-aware like that, I think is not an asset, but it's a good quality to have.
I agree it can be a good quality. It does get to points though where I make myself sick and I put
Yeah.
myself into a depression because I really do over criticize everything that I do. And if I find something that is validated in being a like incorrect action, oh man, I will harp on that shit for days.
Yeah.
And I will think of a million other things that I could have done that would have I did a better outcome or caused a better outcome. It doesn't ruin my days, but it definitely does mentally. It's hard.
Yeah, no, it's fucking exhausting to be honest. And like it's one of those things where you just like you chew on things over and over and over again, and it's like it almost like it torments you, and you're just going about your day still trying to be a person, but you've got this mental, I don't know, like soundtrack going on in the background of remember this, it could have been this, it could have been this. And
Yeah.
a lot of people who are highly introspective, that's the dark side to it, is it does torment them to a degree, but it's also a superpower.
Yeah. See, I see it as a superpower too, because when you rip things apart like that and you dwell on it for weeks or days, the next time that comes up, you're able to recognize it a lot faster, and you've already worked through every single scenario in your head and you know how to address it.
Right.
I think that behavioral patterns come from a lack of information. We respond or react based off of previous life experience. If you've never experienced something, you're going to react on an emotional level. But if you've experienced something a few times, you've got an emotional response ready to go. It's like having a conversation with yourself before you actually have the conversation with someone else, hoping that it goes the way that it went in your head. You know?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And we create our own reality based on the thoughts that we think, the way that we talk about ourselves, other people. So if you're a person who's playing through these scenarios and you're deeply introspective, you're thinking through it, you're almost bringing it into the reality before it even happens because you've thought on it. You've really taken time and devoted energy to it. So it's almost like things go a little bit easier when they're out in the real world than they might if you weren't in that like introspective mode.
Right.
Thoughts become things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have another question?
Nope. I'll wait until you get through the next little set of questions. I'll take notes if I have to.
Well, I'm not on to the next set of questions. I'm still on that question.
We'll get it.
Okay. So once you start implementing choice theory with your clients, what kind of changes do you start seeing? Is it improvements? Are you recognizing that they're hitting like bumps in the road because they're recognizing their choices directly affect their life? How does that tend to look once they start implementing it?
Honestly, once they start implementing it, I would say it's actually the opposite. It's a lot less friction. You kind of see the person become a lot lighter when they really like take on to the idea. It sets them free. Like all that guilt and just like emotional muck that we wade through, like based on like taking accountability for other people's actions or thinking that we are responsible for like all these things that are outside of our lane. Once you turn the noise off on that, like the person typically starts to come in a bit lighter. Now they still have to talk through certain things and they might not realize certain levels of like control psychology that they're trying to still like put out in the background in their relationships. And that's something that we talk about. I'll be like, ooh, oh, why? Okay, what are you trying to accomplish by doing that particular behavior or saying that thing to your husband? And then that'll be the moment where they're like, oh yeah, actually that's outside my lane. I talk a lot with my clients about inside your lane and outside of your lane.
You gotta hit them with, damn, you're right. Okay. I see the logic in that.
Can you explain control psychology real quick? Because you just used that term, and we covered that a little bit last night, but can you just refresh for the people that didn't watch our live?
External control psychology is where you try to exert your control over things that are not within your control. You make these attempts or have this like false belief that you can do this thing, or you believe that other people can control your thoughts, actions, emotions, and you take responsibility for things that are not a part of your free choice.
Okay. Can I ask another one? Or are you ready to continue?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. Do you think that as you're teaching people choice theory that okay, let me back up a little bit. We're told a lot that we victim blame
Oh yeah.
because we tell
Victim
people they
blaming.
have a decision to make and a choice in everything that happens in their lives, and people always turn that into a negative thing. As you teach people choice therapy and as they understand the accountability in their life, do you feel like they maybe have less of a victim mentality moving forward, or when they're done with their therapy sessions? Okay.
And the thing with it is that you have to be, and I would imagine that the reason you guys get a lot of that is like in therapy, like a lot of it is like, I'm emotionally validating, but I'm also doing this thing at the same time.
Right.
Like it's this like really tough balancing act where you're like, I'm preserving the relationship. I'm not trying to like come on too strong and like all of this kind of like teeter-tottering in addition to pushing.
Right.
So like it's both. So when people just hear like the hard like truth of it, which is the truth, if they're still in that mindset of like I'm not ready to face this, they're going to buck against it.
Yeah.
They're just not ready. And a lot of like what the therapy is with reality therapy is gauging, when is this person going to be ready? Like what is that going to look like, and like how do I kind of like get them there without scaring them off?
Do you feel like as you're trying to push people towards that, oh man, do you feel like you get a lot of pushback like naturally for that? Is that the longer part of your therapy? Because I would imagine once you start implementing this and people start accepting the accountability of it, that they're probably coming more to the end of what you're trying to do at that point, right? Like if you mentor somebody for a year, or not mentor, if you're with somebody in session for a year, would you say that the majority of that is trying to develop a relationship with them so that you can have that conversation versus like the later end of that where it's a shorter process, like, I don't know, 6 months versus 6 months, or 10 months versus 2 months? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Honestly, I would say like there's a big chunk in the beginning of just relationship building and like showing this person that like you're safe and I'm going to challenge you on these things, but that doesn't mean you're bad. That doesn't mean you're immoral. That doesn't mean like you can't change and that I'm like shunning you or like trying to like put something on you. Like it's a lot of like bubble wrapping in the beginning, but it's important because like a lot of people who come to therapy, they're in emotional distress. They're like their emotions are just on such high alert that hearing a message like that, they might not be ready for it. They need to attend to the fires first before they're ready to like start putting the structures into place to make their life better.
I bet there's a fine dance of making it known that you're not blaming them
yeah.
and just bringing to
Yes.
the light that there are actions and consequence.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy
Exactly.
how different what she does versus what we do is.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think I could have the patience
I don't either.
for that.
I know that I don't. Here's a question that's kind of off topic, if you don't mind. Do you think that people hearing the emails being read, that they can kind of correlate to their life, but is not directly related to them, is beneficial to them in helping them understand that they have a decision? Because when somebody gives you an example and it's something you can relate to, you're never being attacked. It's not your life, it's someone else's. Do you think that's a benefit to people? Do you think what we're doing in that aspect is beneficial?
Yes, because like
Okay.
people have that defensiveness, like they will personalize things. So if they hear their story reflected in something else, like the details are a little bit different, so I don't have to like attach so much ego to it, basically.
Okay.
It's an
Not so much
easier
emotion.
like pill to swallow. And I just want to say too, like part of I think why you guys' delivery works as well as it does is your authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So like that is disarming enough to people where there's like a comfort that's already established
Yeah.
by just showing up and being raw, basically.
I had a question and I had it framed and I had it ready to go and it's gone.
Because you saw me walking. Got to see the booty as I walked out the door. I know I'm a distraction.
It's that and the kneecaps.
Saw all this manliness.
What were you just talking about? I'm so distracted. You asked a question, you walked away.
My question was in that the way people are able to relate to what we're doing.
Yes, okay. We're getting back there. Pamela, what did you say?
So so interesting. I think I said something. Damn it.
Oh no, we're all on the confusion train.
I remember a key part of it was like, yes, that people hearing other people's story, like they can naturally apply it to themselves without feeling like called out, but still get the same
Right. And you said
benefit.
something about the assertiveness also being disarming but comforting.
Yes.
Oh, I
So the
missed
way
that.
that you guys come in and you're just 100% yourselves, you're not putting on airs about anything. Like that's the thing that is very different about my job is because of the role that I have, I'm operating as a professional. So I have to kind of like break down barriers in a different, more like boundary enforced way where you guys can just be you and that's disarming to people and your message is heard a little bit better than like mine would be initially because I'm just some like lady who's in a blazer with a clipboard and like that's a lot for people.
Just nodding at you, not really conversing.
Yeah. I mean, well, we converse like in the beginning, but
Yeah.
like still people have this image in their mind of like therapy is going to be very stuffy and very serious and we're going to sit on the couch and it's going to be this whole thing and we have to kind of work to get past that mindset of it first.
My question is not coming back. So if you had something that you just written down,
I actually have a couple of them. I forgot to ask you when we started, how long have you been doing this?
So, I guess total 4 or 5 years.
Okay. You just mentioned, the other question was that I wrote down, you just mentioned that you were, because we are able to be very direct and you are having to be very professional, there's a different approach for both of these. We were discussing one time about how things have changed in terms of like what's going on with Jordan B. Peterson and the way they're trying to remove his
license.
ability to
Yep.
counsel. So is there a fear in your field right now with the way that you're able to conduct yourself professionally and like, because this is setting a precedence, right? If they strip him of his license, he doesn't need it.
right.
He's worth like $10 million and he's making
Yeah.
more money on YouTube and with the Daily Wire than he ever made in his practice. And he has tenure at his college. So it's not like they can even fire him for that. But
Right.
if they strip him of his license, is that going to set a precedence in your field in terms of the way that you conduct yourself, not just in the office, but outside of it as well? Is that something that you're concerned about?
I mean, yeah, definitely. There are a lot of this. How do even like trying to answer the question answers the question.
Right.
So I'm over here thinking like, how do I answer this in a way that's like towing the line and being very, mm,
How
yeah,
horrifying.
Right.
How horrifying.
Hmm.
It's a very simple question.
Right.
yeah,
And just knowing that there can't be a very straightforward answer and the fear that I could lose my career.
Right.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
And it's nothing derogatory.
No.
It's not hate speech. It's not
no.
brainwashing. It's not you need to do as I say or your life is going to be absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
You
So
have to be you have to be careful because I mean, what you say as a counselor, if you take hard stances on things, you're kind of operating outside of your realm in some ways.
right.
Because a lot of it is like I might have my own values, my own beliefs about the world and like how things operate, yes, but like that doesn't necessarily belong in the therapy room. But if I'm talking about that a lot outside of the therapy room and people are listening to that, that's going to start creating that divisive line. And then I lose like I guess like ambiguity of being a therapist, of being this like blank slate. Suddenly I'm like, I don't know, I'm like a preacher instead.
Right.
And that's like counterproductive to like specifically therapy.
Okay. So let me word it in a slightly easier question then. If we were doing therapy the way that we are doing emails and we were as abrasive and as matter of fact as we are, would we be stripped of our license or would we just not have a practice because we wouldn't have a client base?
Actually, so you could actually do therapy the way that you guys talk. Like
Huh.
would it be extreme?
there is no, oh, I'm sorry, what?
Would it be viewed as extreme though?
You might, yes,
Yeah.
but that would actually be what would bring more clients to you.
We've heard somebody in a college class said that their professor was using our podcast as examples of extreme therapy and ways to help people cope with things.
Yep.
That blew my mind.
Yeah, they said that we're a very big topic of discussion in their entire course.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they said that they're breaking down some of the things that we say, and it becomes big discussions in the classrooms, and they're trying to use us as examples. And I asked the person after the live stream was over if it's a negative thing, and they said that some of the people in the class do take it negative, but everyone has their own cognitive bias. but the teachers are impartial. They're just letting the kids argue it out and make the points, and like, or the young people, whatever, the professionals, whatever you want to call them. But it's cool to me to know that, because we hear people say, you know, I've been in therapy for 7 years. I've listened to your podcast for 3 months and I've gotten more out of it. And that's why I asked about if people are just taking what we're saying, relating it to their life, and are able to process the shit, because we're not calling them on it. But I also know that we are very blunt with the things that we say. And I'm very unapologetic about it, because if I think you're doing something stupid, I'm going to tell you are. I don't have a say in your life. Like, it doesn't affect me one way or the other. But if I was a therapist and my job was to heal people, that would be a very different thing.
Right. It's a different like modality, different approach. But I think that because it's not like face to face, we're building a relationship like in the way that therapy is. Like, you guys are able to just be blunt and just say things, and you take it or you leave it. Where like me as a therapist, my job is to try to act in the best interest of the client. So I want them to get the message. I really, really want them to get the message, but I want to make sure that I'm not so aggressive with the message early on that like it's going to completely cause them to abandon therapy and think that like all therapists are just going to yell at them or like something like that, which doesn't always happen in that way, but like it's a concern. You have to just like judge, like, where is this person at? I've definitely had clients that have come in who are ready to just start challenging shit and like breaking shit down. Like, they don't need as much of like the relationship building because they're just in that space.
What do you think? What do you think creates that kind of person?
Trauma.
Really? Do you think that is it? Do you like, because I see that as, again, that's one of those things that can be viewed as a weakness or a superpower.
Yep.
Do you think that's a trauma response?
Yeah, trauma builds resilience for a lot of people. I mean, you go through hard things in your life and you learn that, hey, this shit happened, but I got through it. And that brings people like faster through the growth process sometimes than if you didn't have those same traumatic things occur in your life. Now, it can also go the other way where they become very like helpless, hopeless about the situation, but not everybody turns that way. A lot of people who go through intense trauma in their life, they just become more resilient. They're like, no, now I know that if I go to the depths of hell, like, I'll be fine because I've done it before. And that's just the attitude.
What you shaking your head over there, Hotness?
The more you expose your immune system to a cold, the more resilient you become to it.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's part of like trauma work with clients, is like showing them that like, hey, this horrible thing happened and it wasn't your fault. In some, like, it just wasn't your fault. Like, we need to turn this around to a place where you got through it. You're not a victim of this thing. You are a person who made it through this thing.
Right.
And all of the like lessons that came with that. And that shows strength.
Yep. You are who you are despite what happened to you. I saw you scribbling a bunch over there.
My brain is going 1,000 miles a minute right now. You mentioned that an early part of this is setting up a relationship between you. Actually, I have two questions. It's gonna be a two-part question. Setting up the relationship structure is the first part of what you do, letting them know that they're talking to you in a safe space and that you kind of got their back and that you're developing that bond. How important is the role of having a personal relationship between a client and a therapist? And I don't mean personal in like that you're going out for beers, but like I've done therapy a lot. I've done court ordered anger management. I've had multiple psychiatric evaluations. I am a fucking mental mess. And there are therapists that I meshed with right away. And I had ironically enough, his name was Chris. He was one of the best therapists I ever had. And he walked me through a whole lot of shit, but I meshed with him my very first session. Like, we just hit it off. But I've also been a therapist where I left angry as shit, wanting to like blow up a city because I couldn't mesh with somebody. So if you don't have a good bond with your therapist, you're not going to be able to work through your shit. So how important is that connection? And do most therapists actively work on cultivating that? Or did I just have an experience where I was dealing with somebody who was too much like me and I just didn't mesh? Like, I have all kinds of questions. My brain's going.
No, that's a really good question. So this is highly studied in our field, highly studied. The therapeutic relationship between the client and the therapist and like the quality of that relationship. Do I feel like I can open up to this person? Do I feel they understand me? Do I trust them? All of these components, do we mesh, essentially, is the number one predictor of success in therapy. not what like treatment you're using, not what interventions are being used in the session, like anything like that. It's, do I trust this person? Am I ready to receive the message that they're giving me because of that trust, because of that bond? Like they've done studies and studies and studies on this, trying to figure out what's the best therapy type. And the answer seems to keep coming back, they're all pretty good on their own merits. Like they have their different pros and cons for different clients, but it matters the most about, does this person feel like you have their best interest at heart and like you can trust them?
Wild. Wild. Did you ever watch that movie, What About Bob?
That all I fucking watched
Yeah.
growing up. That was my mom's favorite movie. We watched that movie every single Sunday night.
Do you remember when they duct taped him to the pole of the boat?
Yes.
Okay, so how normal is it in your field for a client to have your personal cell phone number?
No,
Okay.
no, never that. We don't
Okay.
do that.
Yeah.
I have a Google Voice, and it's great, and I teach them what they can say on the Google Voice, what they cannot, because like there are HIPAA laws and confidentiality.
Right.
If we need to really talk, they need to call me, and
Okay.
they need to call through the Google Voice. So no personal cell phone numbers. There has to be that separation.
Gotcha. You know how many emails we get that say,
Email me or call
yeah,
me.
this is too much to type. Can you just call me? And their cell phone number's there. I'm like, no, we
No.
can't. Like, even if I had Google Voice, there's still, I don't want any extra contact with you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, there has to be a precedence. And this is a lot of like the first session that I have with my clients is like, hey, you have this number. Just so you know, it only operates between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. And it is not a crisis line. I am not a crisis counselor. Like, this is only for scheduling. Like, it's a very thorough discussion of like what the purpose of it is, and that outside of our sessions, that I'm not like to be contacted in that way. Like there are different tools that we set up in support systems, safety plans, where I'm not the person who's like coming to the rescue in that way. Cause it's not safe for me, and it's not safe for the client either. Cause like, what if I'm asleep? What if,
Right.
you know, I'm doing person things and I miss a call from them, and that was like a crisis call? That would be irresponsible for me to make myself the person responsible for them 24/7.
Right.
I think
That's not possible.
right. It's really not. That ties back to the people latching onto you thing. So with HIPAA laws, obviously, it would not be professional for you to say hello to people that you counsel if you see them in public. But do you have patients come up to you? Can you call them patients? Is that what you call them in your field?
I call them clients.
Clients. Okay. Do you have clients come up to you in public and try to have like normal conversations if they see you out and about? Or do they just pretend they don't know you?
I tell my clients that because of HIPAA, if I see them out in public, I'm going to pretend like they're not there. And it's not that I hate them, and it's not that like anything, it's the HIPAA law. And if they approach me, then we can have a conversation. But I'm not going to be like, oh my God, hi, I'm her therapist. Like,
Right.
I can't do that. That's very unethical. We're not doing that. But I have had clients approach me when I've been out in public. And usually they're just kind of like, oh, it's kind of like seeing a teacher in the wild.
Right.
You're like, oh, look, you're a person. And then they just kind of go away. That's like the extent of it.
Yeah, that's good though, because that falls under the attachment thing. Like I gotta be honest. We Peaches and I talk about this a lot because we want to eventually do meet and greets, and we are going to have a security detail when we do that because there are crazy people out there. And though we both conceal carry, that's a concern for me. So I would imagine being that if you had somebody that came through therapy and it was not going well and they saw you in public, like, I don't know, is that a concern for you, or is like, I don't know how that would look. Is that something you're even comfortable answering?
No, I can kind of address that. So like, I mean, that's the thing about being a therapist is like so much of it is teaching clients appropriate ways to interact with you and setting boundaries and showing them what that looks like by enforcing those boundaries. So like very early on, there's a lot of boundaries being established and just reinforced consistently. So I could definitely see why there's a concern for you guys, because you're not doing that conversational work with these people face to face and like engaging them in that and engaging their understanding. It's more of like you have your disclaimer, right?
Yeah.
People might fast forward through that. It just like, it doesn't have the same level of like, hey, this is the line, observe the line. People are going to do what they're going to do because you guys are creating content versus like in a relationship that we're both agreeing to as a therapeutic relationship, these are the established boundaries, it just comes across different. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it did. And it led into a whole lot of other ones, but I've been talking a lot. Babe, do you have anything that you want to ask her?
Yeah, I have a
haven't
couple of
shut
notes.
up. I'm
Okay.
making notes. So Frank's got a whole bunch of shit written in him.
So
Jump in whenever you want.
I kind of want to go back to that conversation that we were having about Jordan B. Peterson and him possibly having his license stripped from him. In that conversation, you said something along the lines of that you don't really have strong stances on anything outside of your profession due to the concern. Because of that, do you know where you stand on things? Are you aware of
do.
who you are as a person?
I love this question. It's very direct.
That
It's
actually
like, are
sounded
you
kind of
real?
shitty.
Did it? No, I didn't mean it to be shitty.
Okay.
I just
No,
if
no.
you're not if you feel you're unable to take a public stance on something in fear of backlash, do you just stop thinking about those kinds of things because you can't have the conversations because of that fear? Or do you still have that internal dialogue of, okay, this is where I stand on that, but I can't really have the conversation?
Okay, so I'm really glad that you asked this because when I did give that answer, I was like, ooh, I don't think I represented what I meant with that.
Okay.
So publicly speaking as my professional self, which is what I'm doing right now,
Right.
it's not a great idea for me to take hard stances because I might be seen by a potential client who's going to come in and know what my belief systems are and like kind of superimpose all of their ideas based off of what I've said
Give them like a
versus it
negativity
being about
bias.
them. Yeah, it needs to be about them. So they have all these ideas about me where that's not appropriate in a therapeutic relationship. Like it's their process, it's their time.
Mm-hmm.
Publicly, though, like with anybody else I talk to, not in my professional role, I do take very hard stances on things and I have very serious opinions about them. It's just when I'm operating as a professional, if I'm talking about issues
Mm-hmm.
as a therapist, as I am kind of right now, I don't want people to know. It's kind of goes back to the attachment question too. Like I don't want people to be too familiar with me and like know
Right.
about very personal things because it crosses boundaries that set a really sticky precedent.
Gotcha. I feel like there'd be a sense of loss of self if you can't take a stance
Right.
outside of your professional life on anything. I would stop thinking about things. Why would I put
And
my time and energy into a stance on a political issue, for example, if I can't have the conversation in fear of a backlash?
right. And for me, it's like less of a fear of a backlash. Like in the case of like what's going on with Jordan B. Peterson, like it's less of that fear. It's more of a fear of like, is this going to affect my current relationships with clients?
Right.
Now they're going to come to me and be like, you said this. Do you really believe this? Does that mean you're judging me? Does that mean this? Does that mean this? I don't want that to happen
Right.
with like the people who are currently under my care. That's not to say every therapist feels the same way about that.
Mhm.
As the case of Jordan B. Peterson, he's very firm in what he believes, and I really admire that. And
Yeah.
I hope one day I can get to that place. Part of that is me just being a baby therapist. Like I'm
Yeah.
a lot younger to the profession, so I think I'll gain more of that as I go through it.
Are you pressed for time? I guess I probably should have asked you that as well instead of assuming.
No, I'm good for right now.
Okay.
So, in regards to what's going on with Jordan B. Peterson and them possibly stripping him of his license, if this were a relationship, say a family relationship, would you view this as a toxic one?
Ooh, I don't think I understand the question.
Yeah, I don't either.
So, he is being threatened of being stripped of his license
Right.
because he's speaking on things.
Right.
There's free speech that's protected.
Well, that's actually his biggest gripe. His biggest thing is like we need to continue to protect free speech. That's why he gets so much hate.
Right. And because he's speaking out in that way, he's not doing anything to harm anybody.
Right.
He's literally speaking his opinion on things, which is what we do. And because of that, they are thinking of stripping this man of his license. There's really no reason as to why. It's just you're offending people, you're pissing people off, you're causing problems for us. So we're going to kind of shut you up a little bit. That's my view on it.
Right.
Am I incorrect in that assessment?
No, that's what I would get from it too.
That's what's happening.
So in that situation, if that were a family relationship, romantic relationship, would you say that there are things that would have to be worked on because that is not a healthy way to handle things?
Oh, 100%, 110%. I mean, we can compare it to like a husband and a wife, right? The wife
Hmm.
brings up something she's not okay with doing. She
Yeah.
takes a stance on something. She draws a boundary.
Hmm.
She says, "You're not going to tell me this thing," right? And so the husband's reaction to that, instead of just like taking in that information, doing what he will with it, or trying to like work through a solution, is to punish her
All
in
right.
some way. That's abusive.
Okay.
That's manipulative. So, yeah,
I
that
feel
is very
validated in
toxic.
your response. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that my thought process was not illogical on that. And
No, I completely got it after you explained
yeah,
it.
I think a lot of people don't recognize what's going on with Jordan B. Peterson right now.
Yeah.
They
Well,
just know the things
Yeah.
that he speaks on, that he's an intelligent man, and that people don't like him.
yeah. Whenever you take a snippet of a conversation and cut it into 10-second segments, you can make anyone look bad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But because I don't listen to the media ever. When somebody says, "Hey, this is going on," I have to research it because it's all bullshit.
Right.
And that's how I found out who he was. They were saying that he was a therapist and that he was a racist bigot. And like
Yeah.
I deep dove into his shit, and all of his things come down to is, you're not gonna force me to say something. We have a freedom of speech, and if I believe this, I have the right to believe it. I'm like, I don't understand how this is racist. This is,
Right.
he's trying to set precedents
Yeah.
that if you take away speech and you thought police people, 1984 is coming. Like, anyways.
No, I will take a definitive stance on this actually. So I just read one of his books, I think it's the 12 Rules for Life.
Yep.
And when I first came across his content, I remember one of the first things I thought about it was I was like, I think like if I had liberal friends or like certain types of friend groups, like they would be mad that I was watching this. Like
Right.
that was the impression I got from it.
Hmm.
And then I was like, okay, well, what is this man about? All I've ever heard is like what's going on in Twitter and what's going on, like the discourse about it. I want to read like what his ideas are. I read that book and I cried at the end. I thought it was beautiful, wonderful, very compassionate. And so like the way he's being painted, it's just it just doesn't make any sense to me for
Wow.
what he writes.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
We actually have that 12 Rules for Life and 12 More Rules for Life on a recommended reading list that people download off of our website.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. So that really like opened my eyes and changed my mind about a lot of things, which just like thinking about how he's being painted right now and then actually seeing like, okay, what is the man actually talking about? Being like, oh wow, this can it can get distorted so quickly.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to distort it too.
Yeah. It doesn't take much.
It really doesn't. I mean, I know you guys probably experience that too. People just taking like small things out of context and being like, see, this is all they stand for. And it's like, no, no.
It's so exhausting.
We kind of do that shit to ourselves, though. In all honesty, we do. When we clip our content, sometimes it's intentional to trigger people.
Mhm.
I think even though with the context, when people pay attention, they're able to piece things together.
Yeah, but the people who don't want to will see that and be like, "I knew it!"
Right.
Rah! And then rage in the comments. And I'm
Yeah.
like, victory, because that's the intent. We want people to be engaged on our posts.
Yes, that's true. It's just there's no connection in my brain when we post a video and somebody who follow us goes, "Oh, they support grape,"
Yeah, that people are dumb.
and they're like, "No, they just said this. You're not understanding the context. They said it. They support grape."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I see
It's
you
truly
reach-
wild.
I see you reaching. Do you got another set of questions? Because I would like to ask one about boundaries.
No, I'm ordering a book.
The 12 Rules for Life.
Yeah.
Okay. You were mentioning setting boundaries earlier with your clients and the necessity of that. With the way that you set things up, you are basically, how do I word this? With what we do in our relationships and the things that we tell people, when you're in the courting phase, you express your boundaries and you make them very defined, and you explain the definition of the words that you're using in case there's any kind of misunderstanding, because that sets up a healthy expectation of what things look like going forward, which is what you're doing in your practice. Do you teach people when they come in how to do that on their own if they struggle with those boundaries? Because that is something that a lot of people lack, because they either feel like they're being controlling, or they feel like they're not worthy enough to have those boundaries, or maybe they put their partner on a pedestal. I mean, I can continue, obviously. There's a whole lot of reasons as to why, but is that something that you help people with as a therapist?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the number one things we touch on in our sessions, boundary work. how to set a boundary, how to respect other people's boundaries. What does a boundary look like? What's an indirect boundary? What's a direct boundary? Like all of these things, what are my boundaries even? Like it, a lot of it is boundary work, and it's important, especially in when you think about choice theory as well, because it's kind of like I was saying before, like operating in your lane is about operating within the boundaries of you and your choices and your control. If you can't respect that within yourself, it's going to be hard to respect it of others. And then your relationships are going to be chaos because you don't recognize where you ends and the other person begins. And that has to have that has to be recognized in order to have a healthy, functioning relationship. You can't reach a compromise with another person if you're viewing them as an extension of you. That doesn't work.
Right. Okay. So here's a generalization, and you can not answer it if you don't want to. But would you say that in general, people who lack the ability to set boundaries and adhere to them for themselves overall have a lack of self-worth? Is that something that you see?
Yeah, I would say a big part of it is it's the lack of self-worth. It's fear of being abandoned a lot of the time.
Okay.
Is if I stick up for myself, if I like put my foot down about something, no one is going to want to stay around.
Okay.
I need to it's a people pleasing thing.
Right.
I need to always like compromise to everybody else so that people will stay in my life because they don't recognize that they have merits past just what they can do for everybody else.
Okay. So with the boundary setting, what would you say is like your biggest piece of advice for boundary setting?
Ooh, biggest piece of advice for boundary setting. I would say if you're a person who's still trying to figure out what your boundaries are and what would be a good place to start with setting a boundary is look at where your guilt is.
Ooh. Ooh, that's good.
That was good. Yeah.
That well played. Bravo. That was fucking good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, look at where your guilt is. Is it appropriate? Does it really like is it really warranted in this situation, or is it because you have this idea that you have to do this for someone else? You follow your guilt and you will find where your boundaries are a lot of the time.
So to translate, am I doing this because I love my mom, or am I doing this because I don't want to hear her complain about me?
Yeah.
Yep.
That was also a very good use of of the word guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I because of my cognitive bias, I view guilt as a manipulation tool because of my life experiences. So when I think of guilt, I think of it as somebody's trying to manipulate me by trying to make me feel guilty because I don't have that emotion the way a lot of people do. Because I'm deliberate. I don't run around stabbing people in the back and like, you know what I mean? So it's very intentional for me. Do you have another question? Then we can come back to me?
No, I
Okay.
don't.
Earlier when you were talking about personal life and that you have, I'm taking notes as we're talking. So you were talking about having a hard stance in your personal life. And that made me think about the fact that I am very stuck on the lack of connection between people right now. You and I talked about this earlier, babe. With the advent of social media, we no longer have friends. We have a digital connection to people who are not really our friends. Our friend circle has gotten a lot bigger in terms of account, but it's gotten a lot smaller in terms of those who are actually there for you. If you had emergency at 3:00 in the morning and need somebody to come and watch your kid, how many people do you actually have to call that you know will come and help you in that emergency? I know that was a tangent, but I promise there's a point to it. With your profession and your professional circle and social circles, because you obviously have one, you are a human, everyone has a social circle in terms of social media. How much has social media influenced your personal life and like in terms of your social circle, and how has that affected what you do? Because I use social media mainly for businesses, and my personal connections, I still keep in contact with people through text messages and random phone calls. Do you have like an actual real life social circle, or are you like the rest of people who have adapted social media?
No, I don't like social media very much. I one of the biggest pushes I had when I started building up my business and really like getting into private practice was everybody told me over and over and over again, you have to get on Instagram, you have to get on Instagram, you have to advertise this way, you have to do this like social media engagement. And it's just something that's so anti to my personality. I've never really liked engaging like that. I really like quality relationships where I'm sitting and talking with someone for hours. And like, I find it to be, I don't know. I just don't like to devote my time there. So I don't use it in my business and I don't really use it in my personal life. Like I have them because of everybody has them, but
Right.
like it's not something I interact with very much because I don't always see like the value in it. Now, with the exception of TikTok, I really do like TikTok because there's just a lot of like little like bites and like learning type of things. But
Right.
again, I don't often like put my voice out there or pictures or like interact with other people's things as much. I just want information, I guess. That's what the thing with TikTok. But everything else, no, I don't know. I prefer to keep like a very tight knit group of people with very like strong bonds. And so like having that like thousands of like Facebook friends that like I don't really know very well, like there's something that just kind of like, I don't know, turns my skin about it.
Yeah, I get that. Do you know who John Deloney is?
Mm-mm.
Okay. He's an author. He does a lot of motivational speaking. He actually, I'll tell you the name of the book just in case you want to look it up. It's called Own Your Past, Change Your Future. In that book, he talks about how for, the evolution of man, we used to live in tribes and social circles were very tight knit. And there was an anxiety when you were left alone because being left alone would literally mean that you were likely to die. And there was a whole lot of physiological responses that happened in that moment. And the advent of social media changed the way that we have connections with people, which further solidified my thought in all of this. But he said that we went from having family dinners and church gatherings and everybody doing the thing in large social settings, family reunions, to going to phone calls and talking on the phone all the time, to then sending text messages. And now you'll be lucky to even get a reply via text message because people are busy. But we're not really busy. We're not really multitasking like we say we are. We're just overworked, overstimulated from screen time, and it's affecting things. So that's why I asked about the social circle thing. And you saying that you don't use social media like that kind of solidifies what he said, because I feel the same way. Your real life bonds with people that you see on a daily basis are always tighter than those on the internet. The other question that I had with that, because it was kind of a two-part thing, is do you see a lot of people in your with your clients in your practice where technology is destroying the relationships that they have with people, and that is a root of what's happening?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. A lot of, I would say, my younger clients, because it gives this, it seems like it gives this illusion of connection, right? Like
Right.
you're connected to all these things and all these people, but what it really does is like, because you have this illusion, the need for socialization is being met in a way. It's just not being met in the healthiest way or the most like fulfilling way that it could be. It's like the junk food of socialization. So you're just like isolating yourself in this bubble. A lot of the work that I do with the clients is we analyze what would be something I could do in my community? What would be something that I could do to engage in the real world out there with the other people in a meaningful way to me? And that bolsters mental health like I can't even describe.
Because that prevents people from isolating further.
Yes.
Have you heard people ever say, if they're married or in a large group of people, that they still feel like they can be in a room of 100 people of their closest loved ones and still feel alone? Do you ever hear things like that? Is that a depression thing, or do you think that ties into all of this, the lack of a proper connection with people?
I really do think, I mean, it could be both, yes,
Okay.
but I think a big part of it is just that people, a lot of people don't interact with each other in a meaningful way anymore. It's very like expedited and just get through this, and we don't need to like treat each other like people and like really like be here. And a lot of our relationships become like transactional like that, or just very like one-sided. Like people are talking, but they're not listening. So it just doesn't hit the same. So you feel very lonely. You don't feel heard. You don't feel seen. You're just there. And there are people there, but you're there.
What a shitty feeling.
It is a shitty feeling.
It's a very shitty feeling.
I saw you typing. I know you got questions.
Yeah. So do you notice a difference in the mental state between people who have that real life social circle versus the people who are more present on social media?
Yes, absolutely. The more fleshed out your support system is, the better your mental health is.
Can you explain that?
Like, what are some of the key differences you notice? For example, like security in themselves.
It's a big difference. I mean, just having those close people that you know that you can rely on. I mean, the world is kind of chaotic. Like a lot of stuff happens, and we need people. People need people. So when you can navigate the world knowing that you have this group of people who are on your team, you're going to feel a little bit more confident. You're going to feel a little bit more safe, basically. And that is a protective factor for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of safety and worth that comes from having close relationships.
Yeah. You hear a lot in social media, people saying, I have all these friends and they have thousands of Facebook friends and they have a massive following on TikTok and their Instagram has tens of thousands of people following it and they're getting massive likes on everything. Would you say the people that choose to dedicate their time to amass that kind of following have a stunted understanding of what real life connections are?
It depends. Again, it's what are they trying to do with the social media? Is it the only form of their relationships?
Okay, so here's a hypothetical. We have a young woman, 22 years old, has a very active social life, like doing the club scene, has massive following on Instagram, TikTok, all of that, and dedicates probably 10 hours a day to making sure she's keeping up on socials, interacting with people. And she works at Verizon.
Okay.
So even though she has that social life of going out into clubs, majority of her focus on interactions is on the social medias.
Mm-hmm.
So in that situation, would you expect to see a more compromised understanding of what a healthy relationship looks like in real life?
I think you definitely could, yeah. Because she's like, if we're talking about this woman, like she's not putting in the work that it takes to maintain a relationship. It's easy to throw a like on something. It's easy to, swipe right or send a heart or whatever it is that you're doing digitally.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot harder to sit down with another human being and be fully present with them, engage in ideas with them, be there for them emotionally, work through problems together. All this stuff takes time, skill, and energy. And if you're devoting your energy to these micro interactions, you're
Ooh, that's
naturally
good.
kind of taking away from the skill set that is needed over here.
Okay. I had a question. Now I'm hung up on the micro interactions.
That was good.
That was good. Yeah.
Do you think that makes people socially awkward in real life
Yeah.
situations? Okay.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a difference? So, for example, there are different dialects in language, right? Like the English language has different dialects in it. Would you say communicating online versus communicating in life is two different dialects?
Ooh, I like how that's phrased. I like how that's phrased. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
There's something, I don't know. I think, I don't know how to explain what the difference is though, but yes.
So there's definitely a noticeable change in human interaction.
Oh yeah.
There's a
I mean,
different
it's a lot.
understanding to things on the internet versus in real life.
There's no consequences
yeah.
on the internet.
Right.
There was no what on the internet? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
No consequences.
Yes, lack of accountability again,
Right.
because you can just throw shit out there, right? And
Turn
you
your
don't
phone
have to
off.
think about the person on the other side of the screen reading that. It takes the human element out that like we all have emotions, we all have struggles, we all have feelings. And those feelings can get hurt, but when you're just throwing things into the void like that, I mean, it's kind of a careless way to interact with people.
Have you studied? I don't know your background or your schooling or anything, so this might be a very ignorant question. Have you studied the evolution of the human psyche, like the way that we have adapted to handle certain situations like high stress?
Hmm.
Okay. Would you say that with the progression, because technology has progressed massively, but human interaction has not?
Yes.
Okay, so knowing that there is a direct correlation between the fact that technology has progressed and that human interactions and the communication and understanding between one another has decreased, do you recommend to your clients to have less screen time to help improve their relationships?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely 110%. You you gotta engage in the real life, real
Right.
world, like what's going on around you. Because when you're checking in constantly to something like that, or you're plugged in constantly, you're
Hmm.
missing all the things that are falling through the cracks in the real world. And that's micro moments of connection with your partner. That's, some part of the house that's starting to fall to shambles. You're you're blind to it because you have this like dopamine slot machine on your phone, and you're not looking at what's going on around you. So you have to take a moment to come up for air so that you can actually attend to the problems that are in your life.
I wonder if there's been a brain scan comparison of what the human brain looks like now after being on the internet, say, for 5 years and having that constant interaction versus a brain scan from somebody in like the early 2000s.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure there has been,
Oh,
but I
I
don't
would
think
love
that
to see that.
I
Right?
don't think that we would ever actually be able to see that though. That's not something they would willingly show the public.
I bet there is a massive deterioration of like gray matter
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, we've definitely gotten dumber.
Yeah.
I have a personal question in terms of your personal life because we're talking about screen time. I don't know if you're married or if you're just dating somebody, but if you were a single woman, knowing that what you know about with the field that you're in, and knowing what you know about screen time and the way that you view it, is that something that would be a red flag for you on and during the courting phase? Is that something that would turn you off to someone?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah. My partner now, actually, that was one of the first things I noticed about him on our first date was that he didn't pick up his phone once.
okay.
And
Oh,
that was
okay.
a green flag. I was like, beautiful, chef's kiss. If we can vibe, we're gonna be okay.
We
I would have noted that and be like,
yeah
I saw that at dinner. You didn't pick up your phone. Okay.
yeah
Where are we going on the second date?
yeah.
Yep.
We've actually helped program dates for men in the men's group, and that was one of the things that we said is to leave the phone in the car, and you and I did that.
Hmm.
Um, and I got to be honest, because of the business and because of everything in the way that I'm attached to my device, it was uncomfortable for like the first 30 minutes.
I could tell you were anxious.
Yeah, I had a weird fucking separation anxiety from my phone.
Hmm.
And since then, I've been trying not to be as attached to the digital device. And like, I've removed one of the emails from my phone. We've processed over to new screeners so that we don't have to deal with the emails as much. But there is a constant fear of the alarm company calling me,
A
or
fire.
right, or the
A fire to put
manager,
out.
right, calling me going, hey, the AC just broke, and me not having my phone because they're so used to me having it. But I also don't want to tell everyone in my world, like, hey guys, going silent for 2 hours,
Yeah.
unless the world is, because even then, like, I don't know. I know what it was to have no cell phones. I remember that life and everything was fine.
Yeah.
But because we've become so attached to our digital leashes that we forget what it is to have that freedom.
Yeah.
It's very wild to me.
I
It's a
love not
boundary
having my
issue.
phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put my phone down somewhere and I'll forget where it's at and it's gone for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
Then I'll stumble upon it again and be like, oh, there you are.
Hmm. Because
Not,
I mean, when you always have your phone and everybody has access to your time 24/7, that's active energy from you,
hmm.
knowing that they have the access and that they know that they have the access. Like it's just this, it's a weight. It's a weight that you carry around for as long as you like operate in this way where you don't have more like boundaries with the phone and boundaries with everybody else of like, hey, I need time to be a person. I can't be accessed all the time.
Right.
You can't have this part of my life. I'm sorry.
I think constantly about times like when we're watching 1929 or whatever that show is with the
Oh
Yellowstone,
yeah.
where they're sending letters back and forth. Like, how peaceful.
Right?
I wish people would just contact me through the mail.
You know that Napoleon Bonaparte wouldn't open his mail for 2 weeks.
Good for him.
Didn't matter what it was. And
Good for
he was
him.
like, if it really matters in 2 weeks, it'll still really matter. And if
Yeah.
it doesn't matter in 2 weeks, it's not going to matter. And he wouldn't open his mail for 2 weeks. That's wild when you think about it. And we are fucking attached. We get a little ding. We're like, who's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yep,
crazy how far
absolutely.
we've come.
You are the only person who has unlimited access to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Like my
Because
phone doesn't ring for anybody else.
there are times that I'm like, please fucking answer the phone.
Oh, yeah, no, it only rings when you call. I have it set that way. Because I'm so aloof about where my phone is majority of the time.
Yeah.
I love that I have set that boundary for people in my life. People know not to call me.
Yeah.
I will call you. When I'm ready to talk, we'll call. I'll call. And if it's inconvenient for you, okay, dope. We'll try another time. And if it's in 2 weeks, it's in 2 weeks.
With your practice, I was just sitting here because you mentioned the people calling you. How often do you have the parents that overstep in a younger person's life in terms of like a monster-in-law situation or a overbearing, over-controlling, borderline inappropriate mother-son relationship kind of thing? Is that a super prevalent thing in your practice?
It's fairly prevalent.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like I think right now what's going on, kind of tying it back to technology in some ways, but there's a real lack of like an understanding of like boundaries, the end of you and me in this situation, like and where the lines are for the relationship. So yeah, you see it a lot with parents as well, like trying to extend over and like drag their kids through life based on what they believe needs to happen versus like the free choice that that adult needs to make. And it's not healthy.
What would you say is a healthy amount of screen time in terms
Oof. I don't know if I'm qualified to speak on that one.
Yeah.
I would say just, ooh, I couldn't give an exact number. I really couldn't. I would just say as long as it's under the limit of it interfering with your sleep, interfering with your romantic relationship, and interfering with like keeping of your house. If all of those other things are in order and then you have screen time, cool.
Yeah.
So that's going to look differently for different people.
Right. In that book that I was reading, the one that I mentioned a minute ago, he talks about screen time. And when he talked about screen time, he actually like talked about screens, TVs, phones, computers, including when you're at work, when you're driving, tablets, because your cars all have screens now, televisions in the bedroom and things like that. And he's like, most people have so much screen time that they don't even realize that they're getting screen time in because they only think about their phone being the screen. And that fucked me up because I have minimized my screen time a lot since we started getting big because of the amount of stress that was coming with it. But I've switched that screen time from my phone to editing. And when we're not editing, we're on the couch watching TV. And I think that my screen time may have increased because I'm editing all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't correlate the two. It's wild when you think about it.
It is. So much of like modern life involves being in front of a screen in one way or another. So engaging back in, like I was talking about before, the real world, like we're going outside, we're tending to the small tasks of the house, we're tending to the small moments of relationship, like that has to like come back into the forefront in order to feel better, because otherwise your life is kind of spiraling out of control on the sidelines when you're always like in front of something else like that, and it gets so stressful. So stressful. I feel that a lot in my practice when I'm doing telehealth for 8 hours. Like I kind of like get into this state sometimes where I'm like, I'm not realizing that I'm not eating as often, or I'm like losing track of like my positioning. Like I need to get up and stretch, but you just kind of go into this almost like lull in a way.
Yeah.
Like a hypnosis.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You ever have anybody pull their cell phone out in the middle of a session?
Oh, all the time. Sometimes to read me the receipts of whatever has been going on, like with the relationship.
no,
Sometimes
pull
just
out.
because someone called.
Yeah.
Does it sometimes feel like Jerry Springer?
On our end, yes, it fucking does.
No, like in all honesty, like when do you ever have moments where someone's reading you text messages and you're listening to everything that's happened, like the drama between these two, and you're like, oh man, this is what he did.
There, I mean, when my clients are like talking to me like that, we'll have those moments where we're just going into the drama of it because
Yeah.
that's the person relationship.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
so
we are
we're
gonna
aware we're
dice.
having a tea party.
Yes.
Okay.
So like we're gonna have that moment because that's important to our relationship. We're gonna connect it back to your trauma probably at the end of it. But like, yeah, I definitely have those moments where I'm just like, damn, that's fucking crazy that that happened. And I'll say it to my client as
Yeah.
I'll just be like, wow, wow.
That's funny.
I don't keep it like completely blank face the
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
time.
Right. I wouldn't be able to hold it back.
No, me either.
I'd be like,
No,
she
you
said
can't.
what?
Yeah.
Let me see. I comprehend better when I read.
Yeah.
Or I'll just do like a little like I'll do a really intense deep breath in, and a lot of my clients know that that's me being like, oh shit.
Hit him with
It's
that.
yep.
Ooh,
Mm.
that's
Or
funny.
oh okay. Oh okay.
Oh, so that's how they chose to conduct themselves. Gotcha. All right.
Yes.
I
Yep.
understand.
100%.
You probably really do have the patience of a saint. And I don't think people thank mental health workers enough, but you are very much appreciated for the things you do in the universe.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I feel like this was a really good interview and I could do this
Yeah.
all night.
I
But
had
I think
fun.
that we're at a point where we should probably wrap it up because we've ended on like a fun note.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
With Dakota, I told him that he could give a final thought and say anything that he wanted to say on the pod. So I think we should do that every time we interview somebody. So if you have anything that you would like to say to the world, now is your time to do so.
I would say like the biggest thing that I want to tell people is just pay attention to your people. Pay attention to the relationships in your life that mean the most to you. That's all you get to take with you at the end of all of this. So pay attention to your people, and your people is also you. So your relationship with yourself is so, so important. You have to keep that strong as well. So relationships, just coming all the way back around. Keep up those relationships.
Dope.
I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I did too. This was a
seems-
really, really good interview.
Very productive. I had fun.
Yeah, same.
I did too. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Would you be willing to do it again?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay. So
All
then
right.
I would like to, as we get emails, I'm going to have the screeners pull some of the really hard shit that we struggle with
Okay.
and put a document together so that we can sit down and like really pick your brain.
What do you mean the
Okay.
things we struggle with?
Because like sometimes we get addiction conversations that like I don't want to have those conversations.
Okay.
Or if somebody's like the monster-in-law situation that we dealt with the monster slayer, like that's been 9 fucking emails at this point.
That's a series. Yeah.
Right. So like we could have, there's times where we're like, we're just going to skip right over that and not acknowledge that they said it and just keep going because this is out of our wheelhouse.
Yes.
I would like to be able to start saving some of that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be dope.
Okay. Pamela,
Yeah.
thank you so much for this. This was a great interview and we will definitely be in touch.
This was definitely a treat for me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this. This made my day a little bit better. So, like I said earlier, thank you for taking the time to do this. The information you've given is going to help a lot of people.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys. And one final, like, quick little thing. I just heard Peaches say this morning that she's interested in becoming a therapist. Girl, you've got the raw skills. If you wanted to throw the degrees behind it, you already have the raw skills. So just wanted to throw that out there a little bit.
How long does something like that take?
You get your bachelor's degree, and then you do a 2 to 3 year master's.
Okay. So how long does it take to get a bachelor's degree?
3 to 4 years, depending on what like your credits are and placement tests.
I do really well in placement tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also like becoming a coach is a really great avenue too. You can do so much of the same work as a coach that you would as a mental health counselor. Like you don't do as much with the diagnostic pieces, but a lot of it is the relationship building, holding space for people, and like trying to get them to see what they're doing.
Okay, so then I have another question about that because in Florida, you can become a personal trainer without a license. You don't have to have a degree to be a personal trainer. You can just go open a gym and go, I'm a personal trainer and personal train. My understanding is that's how coaching works. So you can just be like, I'm a coach, and that works. I mean, does that work? And how does that affect your industry?
It's kind of complicated. I mean, like everybody wants to pit like coaches and therapists against each other. I think a lot of us do very, very similar work. It's just that therapists have a lot more training on like the safety component for people who are really like in crisis and like having serious like psychological disturbance. So if you're a coach and you're like verging into that realm, that's where it gets tricky. But honestly, if you're just dealing with relationship issues, things that can be easily talked through, and there's not like deep trauma, deep like emotional issue there, it's very, very, there's a lot of overlap.
Okay.
Like, if I could go back, no, I won't say that, but like I definitely had the thought of like maybe there could have been a different, shorter path to this, but it is slightly different.
So do you think that there is a reputable coaching like course that she could take if she wanted to go that route versus just saying I'm a life coach?
I'm sure there are some out there. I don't know how much like reputable any of them are. That's the thing about the coaching profession is like it's not like governed by anything.
Right.
And that's kind of like the trickiness of it is like if something bad happens, oh well, like that's
Right.
there's no legal protection. And that's like a hard part of it.
Right. Are you familiar with Laura Doyle? She's an author. She wrote The Empowered Wife.
Surrendered Wife.
Surrendered Wife.
Empowered Wife. She did that one too.
Yeah.
She did a couple of them.
She does a coaching course. And when we first started doing this, we looked into it because I was like, oh, you could do this, babe. Like it's a coaching thing. And
Right.
like I did a seminar because if you did the seminar, the coaching course got cheaper. And even at the cheaper aspect, the coaching course was like $28,000 or something. And I'm like, this is like all you're getting is her certified stamp of approval. And she's nobody.
It doesn't mean anything.
No.
Like
Right.
the thing with like my like licensing board and like having to be very careful ethically and everything is because it's state regulated. It's like it's very like reviewed and there are very strict standards. With coaching, it's not like that. So like anybody coming out here and is like, this certification is going to be what you need in order to be a coach, they just kind of made that up. Like
Okay.
it's not tied to anything.
Okay. Good to know.
I mean, there might be skills in there that could be valuable, but you could probably also learn most of them from a book. Like
Yeah.
you guys read a lot. Like
Right.
it's not.
That's what we're doing.
That is really
Like,
what we're
it's not.
doing.
We are ingesting more books than junk food at this point,
Yeah.
which sucks
Reading a
because I really like junk food and I fucking hate reading.
Well, you
It's so,
listen.
Yeah, I do listen.
it's so funny though. You can hear it when you guys talk. That's why so many therapists are reaching out to you. Is like they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. There's like therapy speak in there, and we're hearing it, and our ears are perking up, and we're very confused. We're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then
The normies understand.
wow, like there, and you guys put it in such a way where it's so like easily digestible too to people. Like you give really good examples, and you're very like you use it in your personal lives. So like I think it's easier for people to access that way, which is really cool.
Well, you just validated the shit out of both of us.
I feel really good right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just really
Good.
earned those cheese fries.
We are going to high five the shit out of each other when we stand up. Just
Yeah.
saying.
Hell yeah.
My hand's ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Focus on the elbow.
That's funny. All right, Pamela,
Well, good
thank you
night,
so
guys.
much. And we'll be in touch.
Have a
Okay.
good night.
Bye.